From a highly secure network of top secret locations across North America, this is the Spurs Insider. I'm Mike Finger, joined as always by our Express News panel of Spurs beat writers Jeff McDonald and Tom Orsborn. It's been an unusual week. Tom has been in the middle of it. We had 2 games since the last time we met. We expected to have 3. Tom spent 4 nights, I believe, on the West Coast with the local Cagers. And I just want to start with you and just get your impressions of, first of all, everything that led into a pretty huge, impressive victory for the Spurs at the Lakers last night. But just tell me what that's been like in a situation where we all back in San Antonio are thinking of the people involved in the Los Angeles area fires. It's a tough situation, but Tom, what was the basketball situation like?
I got to start off by saying I thought Mitch did a wonderful job. I mean, and Chris Paul chimed in yesterday when I asked him about it. I mean, he hit all the right notes from the first time I had availability with him Saturday. He pointed out that no matter what challenges they faced, the uncertainty of whether they were going to play Monday night, the logistical issues they faced, changing hotels, Chris Paul going through what he went through, with his family being forced to evacuate from their home, as Mitch said, it paled in comparison with what so many people were experiencing in the LA area. So I thought he set the right tone right from the start. And then getting them on the practice court Saturday and Sunday to get their minds off of it and also to do some really good work. They had two really good practices and a lengthy film session. And I think that played a part in them ironing out some of the wrinkles they experienced during the losing streak. So, I just thought, and then, Mitch had a really heartfelt statement before the game last night. You could tell it was coming from him. It wasn't written by the PR staff or anything. He went to school at Stanford. His mom lives in Santa Barbara. She, thank goodness, was okay. No fires in that area. But, he's got, an affinity for California also. And, he, like I said, he just hit all the right notes. Did a great job, I thought.
The game itself was one where you almost forgot that the Spurs were at the end of a 3-game losing streak. They went from last Wednesday at Milwaukee, Jeff covered, to this Monday. As Tom sort of alluded to there was a bit of a reset where you get back to the practice court. Does this team have momentum now? Is all right with the world after I think, Tom, you mentioned that Mitch had said it was the best game they played all year, something along those lines.
Especially offensively. Said they flipped the script. I mean, they had struggled of late in games, and they were outstanding in the second half. Scored 70+ points. Outscored the Lakers 37-13 in the fourth. So, yeah, I mean, that, who knows if that carries over, but it certainly was the case that night. And it's pretty impressive. That starting lineup played great. Keldon was great off the bench. Steph Castle, you're seeing him show once again what will come for him in the coming years. So, yeah.
I was struck watching that game from home about the team that just completely fell apart for about a 5-minute stretch, and it was the veteran-laden Los Angeles Lakers. I mean, it was a turnover frenzy, and the Spurs were there to take advantage of it. So, 19-19, 500 again. Seems like every time we meet, no matter what, the Spurs are 500, heading into what could be a tougher part of the schedule. I saw analysis of the remaining NBA schedules this morning. The Spurs are up there top 5 in terms of the advanced stats, the advanced power of schedule strength. So, and most of the Western Conference teams are on the top of that. Most of the Eastern Conference teams are on the bottom. But the point is, it's no guarantee. It's not going to be easy to stay 500 the rest of the way. But after a week like this, tough one in Milwaukee, Jeff, we can get into that. To bounce back against the Lakers the way they did is what they needed to do. But if we want to rewind and go back to Milwaukee, Jeff, that was another expected Victor Wembanyama Giannis showdown, and Giannis got the best of this one.
I think, like the Spurs, we all just want to forget that game ever existed. I don't even remember being in Milwaukee. I was in Milwaukee.
I think you were.
I don't remember that.
I think it was sort of cold.
Yeah, it was all right. We were just right across the street from the arena, so it was okay. Yeah, it was a Wemby like that. If you really want to rehash it, I mean, going into that game, especially all the talk around Milwaukee. If you read the local newspapers, they were flashing back to the only other time Wemby and Giannis had ever met, which was at the AT&T Center, or the Frost Bank Center, excuse me. Last season. They only had one meeting last season. Wemby did not play in his trip to Milwaukee as a rookie. So, and that game was like a back and forth. Like Giannis had 44, I think, but Wemby, it was a big coming out thing for Wemby to go toe to toe with Giannis. He had 30 something in that game.
That was a TNT game too.
There's a TNT game. There was the big moment that everyone remembers where Giannis tried to bully Wemby for a basket, and Wemby just rejected him. And it really was one of those nights, even though the Spurs lost, even though statistically Giannis outplayed Wemby that night, it really was one of those moments from Victor's rookie season where you had to stand up and take note and say like, he's right there. He's right there with a lot of the greats in the league right now, and he's only at the time 20 years old. So you flash forward to this year, everyone in Milwaukee was looking forward to the rematch, and it was kind of a dud. And the reason it was a dud is because Giannis made sure it was a dud. He just dominated, and Wemby was just kind of average. Just kind of average. Had a good start, but didn't finish really. And the Spurs got blown out, and it kind of did not live up to billing that game, and made us all wonder what the heck we were doing in Milwaukee.
What were not to delve too deeply into the distant past, but at that time, Jeff, the Spurs had lost 3 in a row, had blown that lead to the Bulls a couple nights earlier in Chicago. What was the list of concerns for that team, for the local Cagers heading to Los Angeles? I mean, was that a point in the season? Is this still a point in the season where you feel like there are weaknesses that need to be addressed if they want to stay in this playoff race?
I mean, if that's important and you want to look at the personnel, like the Milwaukee game's not a good example, but in both of the previous games, there was that phenomenon where like the Spurs are doing great every time Victor's on the floor, but as soon as he leaves, like boy howdy, it's like a free run to the rim for the opposing team, and the opposing bigs are going crazy. So if you're looking for like some kind of like minor upgrade, they could use some help at the backup 5. They're not getting a whole lot of production there at this point in time. Now, I don't know that they'll really go out and do something, because as we talked before, I don't think this is like a Katie bar the door, we have to make the playoffs kind of season for them. But I think if there's a way to upgrade there, they would be remiss not to look at it. So if that's what you're talking about, that's my answer to that question.
You always go straight to like the click happy like trade stuff. I was just talking about stuff they need to shore up.
I don't know. I'm not a coach.
Trade somebody.
I'm not a coach. You're gonna have to ask the coaches.
Better?
What do they have to do better? I mean, they have to get better. They have to hold the fort better when Wemby's off the floor.
Okay.
So that's one thing. A lot of we've kind of talked about it, a lot of this last time. When you get a lead, hold on to it. Don't think that if you blow the lead, you can get it back. The Milwaukee game was sort of an outlier from all of that, because it was just a complete butt kicking as Mitch Johnson pointed out after that game, and also pointed out like meaning the Spurs, haven't got our butts kicked a lot lately. Like that was the first one in a long time, and he was right about that too. So I'm willing to throw that one out there as an anomaly. Ran into just a better team that night and probably a better team overall. I think injuries have had a lot to do with it, but Milwaukee has definitely underachieved this year. Like on paper, they should be a team that is probably not as good as the Celtics, but is up there near the top of the East, fighting for, at least a spot in the Eastern Conference Finals. And they were right around 500 when they faced the Spurs. Got off to a bad start, but I think we always talk about you are what your record says you are. But I think at this point in time, Milwaukee was playing better than their record said they were, and is a better team than that. And Spurs ran into that and just got manhandled.
What's the interesting part about the possible transaction that you mentioned is if the Spurs want to upgrade at the backup five, it seems like their most tradable asset right now is Zach Collins. Because for other teams that are looking to upgrade a backup five might see Zach Collins as an upgrade. It's a weird dynamic. Like
weird dynamic.
Make of that.
You also might just use Collins as salary and attach a pick.
Yeah.
Like you might be really just buying somebody with picks, and Collins makes the salary work. And again, we're just spitballing here. We don't have any, we're not breaking news.
Yeah.
But you asked earlier about the Lakers game and if it like establishes momentum. And I'm like, of course not. This is a young team. Like there's almost no such thing as momentum. Like just when you think they've got to figure it out and boy, they look really good, then they go and they have a 3-game losing streak where they're blowing leads in Chicago and getting blown out in Milwaukee. And then the immediate schedule coming up is not lending itself to any kind of momentum too. Like you got to play Memphis twice this week at home. And then you go on the road to Miami, which maybe that's a winnable game, I suppose.
It could be the return of Jimmy Butler, although probably not.
Probably, yeah. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for the Spurs.
I know.
And then you go to Paris, and I don't know what I mean, we don't need to preview all that right now, but I don't know what to make of those games. Like, is the distraction factor for a young team going to be high, and it's going to be hard to win those games against the Pacers, or are they going to have the entire country of France on their side and it plays like home games and they ride that way? But I don't know.
The answer to that last part is yes. Those are going to be 2 home games, but they're not home games in their home arena. It'll be like Austin games.
I hope the Pacers are getting paid a lot of money to play a home game with a hostile crowd, because one of those games counts as a home game for Indiana.
Yes, it does. But they get a trip to Paris out of it. I'm sure they'll have a lovely time.
And when they miss the playoffs by 1 game, what a trade, what a deal.
They can win Cooper Flag as their consolation when they miss the playoffs by 1 game.
Just a ray of sunshine.
No, the thing that I wanted to get into from the Lakers game is that young rookie named Stephon Castle started that game, Tom. And is it just me, but he seems to fare better in the starting lineup than he does coming off the bench. And I wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. He was very aggressive at third quarter, 14 points. He said he was just kind of doing what he does, just trying to stay aggressive. It wasn't a case of the defense, the Lakers, him finding cracks. He just was aggressive. And I think he gets into a better rhythm when he starts. Before the game,
he's also playing alongside Chris Paul and Victor Wembanyama. That probably helps too.
It does. And when Devin's playing like he did last night, that's something to look forward. Speaking of momentum, if he can just duplicate, or even come close to just doing that consistently, it's a pretty impressive.
My theory is when you start and play starter minutes, you have a longer leash. Like you can mess up and play through it. Whereas if you're playing coming off the bench is easier to, like, if you have a bad 4-minute stretch, the coach goes to somebody else next time. Or if you have a couple of bad 4-minute stretches, the coach goes to somebody else next time. Like a lot of it to me with Steph coming off the bench versus starting is just a natural downtick in minutes and opportunity. And I think when you see him start, he's he's got more leash to kind of make those mistakes that he's going to make game to game and still play through them and stay on the floor and have a chance to redeem himself. Whereas coming off the bench, he doesn't always have that opportunity.
That is fun psychology, Jeff McDonald, and there might be something to it.
Oh, shut up. I don't want to hear from you.
I'm going to try to increase the podcast ratings here with some conflict and say it has 99% to do with getting to play with Chris Paul and Victor Wembanyama.
Well, yeah.
And play alongside those guys.
Well, yeah. He's giving just another reason, doofus.
Okay, 1% of it is because of what Jeff said. 99% of it.
But you act like when he comes off the bench, he never plays with Victor Wembanyama and Chris Paul, and he does.
He doesn't play with that group.
Sure.
Yep.
Sure.
And I think that moving forward, it's an interesting question to ponder as to and I'm not trying to start any trade rumors here, but Stephon Castle and Jeremy Sohan right now sort of fit into the same spot with that starting group, with your top group. I don't see a scenario right now where those two guys, who are very important pieces to the San Antonio Spurs short and long-term future, fit into the same lineup. And if we want to get into like a debate here, like what does that mean to you? Is that a problem?
Well, yeah, they can't both play in the same lineup, so one of them has to come off the bench, like in perpetuity, probably. Unless one of,
is that a problem?
Unless
two your top guys can't play together.
Unless one of them, and probably at this point, I would put my money on Steph Castle, develops a jump shot.
Yeah,
that would change things. Is that a problem? It could be. Could be, not this season, but as you build this thing out, it could be. I don't mind having them both on the roster as long as one of them can come off the bench and you can fill out the starting lineup in another way. But, I could see where you have two guys that are redundant and you look to move one. And to be clear, they ain't going to be Steph Castle.
And to be clear, they don't both fit into this starting lineup with Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes. Right. Maybe if you add different kinds of players at those other two positions, maybe they both can fit better if Stephon Castle develops the 3-point shot.
That's the key. I think you can get by in this day and age playing one guy. You don't have to guard at the 3-point line, but you can't play two.
That's the issue. That's the biggest issue. So and it makes we're not a Jeremy Sohan hating podcast. I've said many times there's been times this season when he's been, if not their best player, their second best player. Like he's had a really good season when he's been healthy, but lately he hasn't been healthy. And
their record when he is on the bench.
It's better. Well, their record whenever he plays is worse than when he does not play, which is kind of a cherry pick type of deal, but
it is true. It is. Just the fact,
and I just think that a reason for that is that you get a better Stephon Castle when Jeremy Sohan doesn't play. So it's something to watch, and I don't know what the answer is. I think that the Spurs are really happy having both those guys on the team because they do important stuff. Both of them guard like crazy. Both of them pass, rebound, all that type of stuff.
The answer is Castle's going to become better as a 3-point shooter. I think it's going to happen.
Well, it probably needs to. Do you see Stephon Castle as a long-term, let's just say 2027? Is he playing point guard or is he playing small forward? Boy, the audience is stunned.
Like, I don't know.
Point guard.
Probably.
Okay.
Wants to do it. Has the skills to do it. We'll get better at it, just like the shooting.
If he's doing that and he's making 3-pointers at, like, let's say a 35% clip, then that's probably really good for the Spurs. Because then you can play Sohan at 3 or 4. I actually, you'd want to play Sohan at 4. And in 2027 have acquired some type of wing player preferably a shooter, to play alongside Devin Vassell, and then you got a group. Then you got a soup going, as a wise man once said.
But where does 44-year-old Chris Paul fit into all this?
What do you think about? I've mentioned it on here before, but if they don't pull off a big trade, if you don't draft a help you now point guard in June, like I'm not ruling out a return of 41-year-old Chris Paul next year.
I mean, if he's willing to come back for $10 million again under those circumstances, sure.
Tom, I don't know if you weren't watching the TV broadcast, and I can't remember which end of the Staples Center or the crypto.com arena you were sitting on, but that pass to Devin Vassell in the corner last night was just an all-time Chris Paul assist. Did you get a good view of that, or did you appreciate that? Just the whip across?
Yes. Chris Paul, he wanted to be more aggressive offensively, but it's still the passing. That 10 assists last night. He was, it was a tough week for him too. He was pretty emotional after the game, talking mainly about giving his jersey to JJ Redick's sons, him and Wemby, and his voice choked up. It was a tough week for him, but he, yeah.
Well, you talk about him wanting to be aggressive. Like Chris Paul, aggression does not mean taking shots. He can aggressively take over a game without taking a shot. And all the shots that he makes, which he's made a bunch of big ones for the Spurs this year, are kind of gravy. But I was watching our friends Jacob Toby and Sean Elliott call that game last night, and they do a great job. And then someone posted online the Lakers version of that Chris Paul to Devin Vassell assist, and you hear the Lakers announcers talking right before that happens about how Chris Paul is in complete control of this game because the Spurs are on a run. Chris Paul was getting the ball exactly where it needed to be, and just like clockwork, just right on cue as the Lakers announcers make that observation, he makes that pass to Devin, and it's just like, when he talks about wanting to be aggressive, I know that he's talking somewhat about his shot, but when he gets into the lane, like he did on that play, when he kind of dices defenses apart and then can make the pass that leads to a shot for somebody else, that is a version of aggression too. And that's when the Spurs are really at their best. They had 3 20-point scores last night. Chris Paul was not one of them. You had Wemby and we need to probably talk more about Devin Vassell. A great Devin Vassell game, and Stephon Castle, all three of them were above 20. But Chris Paul definitely put his imprint on that game on like Tom said, a tough trip to his home city.
The thing with Chris Paul, and this isn't breaking news either, is he knows where the pass is supposed to go.
Yeah.
Like the play you're referencing, that was really a pick and roll with Wemby, and maybe a younger point guard would be kind of lasered in on Wemby. Like he's the roll man, he's 7'3", but I don't know which defender it was, but the guy that was supposed to be, on Devin in the corner was cheating over to help on the Wemby roll, and that's what Chris read, like a quarterback. So the ball goes to the corner, not to the roll into traffic. And Steph Castle runs that, he might try to throw that lob to Wemby, and maybe it works out, but probably it doesn't. Chris's skill right now at 39 years old is really just knowing where the ball is supposed to be, and probably seeing that better than anybody on the floor even now.
He does. He can see the game. And that has been, again, this is not a trenchant observation, but that has been just so huge in turning this into a playoff contending team. Talking about playoff contention, like the things are starting to get even more jumbled up there in the play-in race. The Kings are not dead yet. We spent part of last week's podcast talking about a possible trade for De'Aaron Fox. Like that's looking, last week it was not likely. It's looking way less likely now that the Kings are in the middle of this again. Doug Christie has apparently been doing wonders there. The Kings are in it. The Suns are not dead yet. There's going to be a bit of a fight there for that 10th spot, and then all the way up to 7th, 6th, 5th. We're kind of nearing a halfway point. They're about to play I think they'll play their 40th game before we meet again, maybe their 41st before we meet again. That'll be the halfway point. Do you still see the Spurs staying in this all the way to the end, or is there going to be a fade at some point when these games start getting more difficult, the road games start piling up?
Yeah, I'm always the negative Nelly, I guess, but I'm banking on a fade a little bit for the reasons you mentioned. The schedule is tough. You're right there at 500 right now. February is going to be rough, man. Like it's just terms of travel. And I think going into, I think it was this last road trip, that was supposed to be a 4-gamer, but it was a 3-gamer. I think the stat I saw was over the next 50 days, the Spurs were getting 5 home games in 50 days. And if I'm not mistaken,
5 games at the Frost Bank Center, or 5 games?
And well, you didn't let me finish. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that 2 of those include games in Austin. So they're not spending a lot of time on their home floor, and asking a young team to hold the fort through that kind of thing is that's a tall ask. Like if they do it, it'll be something.
I don't think that's accurate though, Jeff, because I'm looking at it now, and I
All right,
think
shut up.
I think they weren't counting the Indiana game at Paris, and they weren't counting the Austin games. There are 2.
So 5.
There's 2.
Okay, so you're saying 5 games on their home floor and 50. Yeah. Oh, well, never mind. Yeah, they're gonna make the plan.
And then you got to squeeze in the makeup game out here.
Yep, makeup game against the Lakers. I think
I don't know.
There are only like 2 possible spots that it fits into the 2-team schedule. It's going to add another just lost day of rest there, where there aren't many days of rest.
Yeah,
hardly any days in their home beds. It's going to get tough.
If they can survive the rest of January and February and still be in it, then maybe they have a chance, because it's a lot of home games in March.
March, you really get the good part of it.
A lot of home games in March. So if they can just tread water, hold on to the rope, whatever cliche you want to use, then they have a chance. If they're like 7 games out of it when they get out of the rodeo trip, then
the hopeful the hopeful part of it, if you're looking for the Spurs to continue to compete for playoffs, is that brutal February rodeo trip. Most of it is in the Eastern Conference, which is preferable to the alternative. And then when you come back after those Austin games and go back on the road, you get 2 against the Pelicans, which is the absolute bottom of the Western Conference. So at least, yes, you're on the road for a month. At least you're not playing, Minnesota and Oklahoma City and Denver and the cream of the crop in the West. There's some Bostons in there. Like there's good teams in the East, but you do have some opportunities to not completely drown on the road.
Yeah, you're the rodeo trip part with Memphis and Orlando and Boston and Houston.
Yeah,
might be a problem. But
that is
maybe you can pick off some of the other ones.
You got some at Washington's.
Yeah, don't lose at Washington. Charlotte's better, but don't lose at Charlotte.
Go beat Atlanta. Yeah, it's that's going to be a telltale month for the Spurs. Before we get there, we have a week, including, as Jeff alluded to, 2 home games against the Memphis Grizzlies, who inexplicably, to me, continue to be at the top of the West. No, I mean, Ja Morant isn't, and no one's talking about him in the MVP race. He's not having an MVP season. He's their star. Jaren Jackson Jr. has played really well, but this isn't the team that sticks out at you when you think about NBA Finals contenders, and really it doesn't stick out to you when you talk about powerhouses in the NBA, but they've been a really, really good team, and having them at the Frost Bank Center for 2 games, I think you're just hoping to get 1, and then you go to Miami. I think that is the date when the Jimmy Butler suspension ends. Will he return to the court that day? Who knows? What a mess is going on in Miami. That's wild. But those are the 3 games that the Spurs will play before we meet again. Tom Orsborn, need a prediction.
2-1.
2-1.
Yeah,
including a win at in Miami. You think?
Yes, I do. I think, yeah, they'll. Yeah, I don't know. I just think from what I saw last night, I know we talked about momentum not carrying over, but I think they, you know, discovered some stuff out here. Uh, like Devin said, it was a vacation nobody wanted, but they put in a lot of good work over the weekend. I think they figured some things out. He certainly, he had one of his best games of the season. Not just scoring, but he did a lot of stuff, and he seemed comfortable and at ease. And I don't know, but the big question is, can he continue that?
We mentioned this on the podcast last week, Jeff, the conversation we had with him in Chicago and how he's starting to feel more and more like himself and learning how to play alongside this new version of Victor Wembanyama. And we've really started to see that, especially last night. That's a cool development for the Spurs.
I looked it up after the Milwaukee game, wrote about it a little bit, but after the Milwaukee game, which is one game ago, he started January 24 of 67.
Mm-hmm.
So he's had one game. I don't want to throw water on it. Maybe there's some momentum there, but let's see. That'll give him some encouragement to stack up some good ones. But it was probably I haven't asked him this, but probably over that period of time, probably the longest shooting slump that he's ever endured as a professional. So it was good to see him break it, and we'll see if he can continue it. As for my prediction, a little reason for optimism. Like the Spurs are red hot against the Grizzlies. I don't know if you know this. They have a 1-game winning streak against the Grizzlies. At the end of
the history of that series, the recent history of that series did not look as rosy before that 1-game winning streak.
Yes, they won the final meeting last year at Memphis by a pretty handy margin, and that snapped a 13-game losing skid against the Grizzlies. So
that is pretty remarkable.
I want to say the Spurs have a 1-game winning streak against the Grizzlies, but if you want to be all negative about it and say they've lost the last 14, then I guess that's also accurate. But yeah, I don't know if they're going to beat the Grizzlies in those games. I don't know. I'm going to give them 1 and 2. I'm going to give them 1 and 2. Either they win one of the Memphis games, or they win in Miami. But I'll give them 1 and 2.
That Miami game is like the ultimate look ahead game.
Yeah,
like that could be a real. First of all,
I'm not sure the last time they won in Miami either.
This Spurs team is not. Let's just there aren't James Hardens on the Spurs team, and people who know a little bit about James Harden might know what I'm talking about. You don't necessarily worry about like the Victor Wembanyama's of the world going crazy on South Beach, but South Beach always is an issue for any NBA team when you play there. You worry about the next day.
Honestly, I worry more about the beat writers.
There you go. Tom will be there, and I don't worry about Tom at all. If that was a Jeff trip, I'd worry about the beat writers. But I think Tom's just going to have a nice, quiet meal. I'm sure he already has the place planned. Maybe a Cuban restaurant.
How about Il Gaviano?
Puerto Rico.
Maybe Il Gaviano. But back to my point, there's always the South Beach hangover factor in effect for visiting NBA teams in Miami. And then you throw in the fact that they fly immediately to one of the world's great cities, Paris, France. Like, is there any look ahead to that? That seems like a crazy little trap game there.
Well, but they don't actually fly immediately. This was interesting.
Go ahead and tell the listeners.
They've been told.
I thought it was interesting too.
Their sleep scientists have said, they're going to fly that night after the Miami game to Paris. But they, normally what the Spurs would do is you play a road game. If you're going on to the next city, like all your bags are already on the bus, packed up. You leave the arena, go straight to the airport, fly out. Their sleep study people have told them that's a bad idea. If you're going to Paris, don't do that. Leave all your stuff at the Miami hotel. Don't check out. After the Miami game, you go back to the hotel. You kind of just chill for 3-4 hours. Like they're telling the players, don't pack before you leave. That'll give you something to do. There's going to be a team dinner, of course. And so they're just going to kind of dilly-dally getting out of there. And then they're just going to fly like super late at night and land. And they're supposed to sleep on the plane. Everyone's supposed to sleep on the plane. Then when you land, and then they're going to land, nobody go to sleep, go to the hotel, check in, and then they're going straight to a practice from there. They've also, I've been told after that you're supposed to stay up till midnight, but I don't think anybody's going to make it. But
well, it depends if they can sleep. It depends on if they can sleep on the plane, and that's easier to sleep on a Spurs team plane than it is at the in Coach and Southwest or United or whatever. So maybe they'll be able to do that. But I found that interesting. I thought it was interesting.
They've got it planned out. They've got it planned out how they need to travel, and I was like, I thought I was going to land and get to take a nap. No, I got to go cover practice.
Well, that should be fun for you.
And I am not going to be able to sleep that well on the plane. I'll just tell you that much.
So that factors into the prediction here. I do think they're going to get 1 or 2 against the Grizzlies. The question is that Miami game, and it just seems like such a trap thing to me. I'm going to have to go more Jeff than Tom here, lean towards the negative 1 and 2. But then they'll get 2 back, and I think they're going to. This is for next week's prediction. I think they're going to get both of them in Paris, and Victor in his homecoming. So then overall, you're ahead of 500 there. But that's for another podcast. That's for another week. Hope everyone out there staying safe and sound and warm. And until next time, take care of each other and keep it real.